About 23 years ago. My hometown is a small residential area, more like a village, nestled in the Shikoku Mountains, with a population of around 200 people back then, just as it is now. Scattered patches of flat land fan out around the valley at the center of the village, and houses are tightly clustered together on those limited spaces. A little way from the center of the village, on the slope of the mountain, there stood a single old one-story house all by itself. That was Jiro-san's house. Jiro-san was in his mid-20s, I'd say, and he made his living by farming a tiny patch of land, practically no bigger than a cat's forehead, just in front of his house. He was noticeably taller than my dad, probably around 180 centimeters or so, though it's hard to be sure since I was just a kid looking up at him. Jiro-san had a lean, muscular build, with sharply defined features, and his hair reached down to his shoulders. I remember how that hair would sway gently in the wind, well-groomed and silky. I was quite attached to Jiro-san, so I would often go over to his place. Partly it was because all my friends from elementary school lived in the town, which was far from our village, so I didn't have any playmates nearby. I commuted to school every day in my grandpa's little pickup truck. Jiro-san lived with a rather old man. That old man had completely white hair and was painfully thin. He always wore black clothes, standing right next to Jiro-san, doing nothing in particular but smiling as you watched him go about his day. It was the same even when I was playing with Jiro-san. Even if we went to buy candy together at the only shop in the village, the old man would trail along right behind us. To get from Jiro-san's house down to the shop on the flat ground and back again, you had to go up and down a long, steep slope. But the old man never fell behind. I was a kid, so I was running around, and Jiro-san was a tall guy, so I imagined he walked pretty fast, yet somehow the old man always kept pace. Now that I think about it, I don't recall ever hearing that old man speak. One summer evening, out of the blue, Jiro-san came to our house. I was watching something on TV. We only got 2 channels, at the time. I don't remember what time it was. He came in through the entrance, but that old man who was always with him stayed standing outside in the doorway. Inside, my mom and dad talked with Jiro-san for about 15 minutes, and then he left. My parents seemed ill at ease, and I remember them whispering to each other afterward. Then, together with my grandparents, the 4 of them talked late into the night. Later that same week, everyone in the village was suddenly called to gather at the community hall. The villagers sat in a circle, and in the middle of them stood just 2 people, Jiro-san and that old man of his. The old man looked the same as always, but for some reason, Jiro-san was dressed in a white kimono with long hems, holding a metal staff with a ring attached at one end. The bottom part of his kimono was tied around his legs, and he wore white tabi socks. The adults looked a bit frightened or uneasy. Speaking to the adults, Jiro-san said something like, "Stay here, don't move from this spot until I come back. No matter what happens, do not leave this place." With those words, he left the community hall with the old man. I fell asleep not long after that. I don't know what time it was, but the sound of adults murmuring woke me. When I looked toward the commotion, I saw that Jiro-san had returned. He was drenched in sweat, his hair stuck to his face. The chest of his white kimono was open, and the entire lower part down to his waist was caked in mud. What sticks most in my memory was that the mud on both of his shoulders was a reddish-black color, and it looked kind of like small bite marks. The grown-ups were all thanking him profusely, it seemed. Nodding in reply to each of them, he kept saying something like, "It's all fine now," over and over. I had no idea what was going on. That old man who was always with him was nowhere in sight. The next day, Jiro-san was gone. Even when I asked my parents about him, they just said they didn't know. Eventually, I forgot all about him. Recently, for some reason, I remembered him again. Thinking it through, it seems he was only in our village for about a year. Now that I'm an adult, I can see it clearly. A tiny patch of land like that wouldn't have been enough for a young man and an old man to make a living. Who on earth was he? When I went back to my parents' place, I asked them about it and got a few answers. They told me that Jiro-san was a shugenja, a kind of ascetic practitioner. There's a sacred mountain called Ishizuchi in Shikoku, and he was one of the ascetics who trained there, apparently. At the time, my village was plagued by all kinds of misfortune, people dying in suspicious ways, people going missing, children born with deformities, stillbirths, miscarriages. It was just one tragic thing after another. Indeed, I remember there used to be a lot of mountain searches for missing people when I was a kid. I never saw any babies around back then, come to think of it. The elders of the village, desperate to end this streak of incomprehensible calamities, managed to get in touch with someone who could help, And that's how they came to invite Jiro-san to stay. Everyone in the village chipped in a little to cover his living expenses. They asked him to investigate the cause of all these terrible events, and once he found it, he dealt with it, alone, on that night. Then he left the village. What was the cause, exactly? When I pressed my parents about it, they said they didn't know. I also asked about the old man. Wasn't he maybe Jiro-san's father or grandfather? My parents insisted that such an old man had never existed. They said that Jiro-san came by himself, lived alone, and then left on his own. The elders who had originally invited him had already passed away. Their families also said they knew nothing. There's no clue left about him. If he's still alive, he must be close to 50 now. Even if I met him today, I doubt I'd recognize him. However, in the course of talking to people in the village, I learned one new thing. Up until the Meiji period, the village was desperately poor. Its main source of income was forestry, and they barely grew any crops. When parents couldn't feed their children, they would take them to a forest a short distance from the village. There, they would raise a stone over the child's head. They would bring it down again and again until the child stopped breathing. Once the child died, they would bury them. Then the parents would return to the village and tell everyone, "My child was taken by the gods," making it out as if the child had vanished without a trace. Everyone knew the truth, but pretended otherwise, letting only the rumor of a divine abduction remain. Apparently that's how things were done in the old days.